When I pulled my truck up the gravel driveway that morning, I knew something was off before I even killed the engine. There was a strange glint along the fence line, something metallic catching the sunlight where nothing should have been. I stepped out, boots crunching against the dirt, and squinted toward the road. And there they were. Signs. A whole damn row of them nailed right onto my own fence posts. Big, bold letters stared back at me. No livestock beyond this point. HOA property. I walked closer, heart already pounding with that low, simmering anger that only comes when someone's been messing where they got no business. I traced a finger along one of the signs, then looked down the entire stretch of my fence. There had to be at least 10 of them, all in a perfect line, like a little territorial piss mark from the Maple Hills HOA. I ripped one clean off the post, the screws groaning as they gave way. I flipped it over in my hands, half expecting some kind of stamp or permit. Nothing, just cheap aluminum and arrogance. "Hell no," I muttered. I threw the sign in the bed of my truck and started pulling the rest down, one by one. By the time I'd loaded them all up, sweat was dripping down my back, despite the cool morning air. I climbed into the cab, grabbed my phone, and called the HOA office number listed on one of the signs. It rang 3 times before a clipped, sugary voice answered. "Maple Hills Homeowners Association, this is Phyllis speaking." "Phyllis," I said, keeping my tone level, "this is Jackson Harper. I own the Harper Ranch. Property line runs along County Road 14, bordering Maple Hills." There was a pause. "Oh, yes, Mr. Harper, I've been meaning to talk to you." I leaned back in my seat. "Care to explain why your signs are nailed to my fence?" She let out a little laugh, light and dismissive. "Oh, those. Well, you see, we've decided to establish a community walking trail to the river. It's part of our new wellness initiative. Unfortunately, your fencing cuts off the most direct route, so we mark the area for community access. Nothing personal." "Nothing personal," I repeated, feeling my jaw clench. "Phyllis, my fence has been there for 30 years. That's private land." "Well," she said, her voice hardening just a notch, "perhaps you're unaware, but that section has been used informally by residents for years. We're simply formalizing it. The board voted last week. It's been decided." I exhaled slowly, pressing a hand to my temple. "No one's walking a trail through my pasture. I don't care what your board decided. This is my family's ranch, not some HOA park." There was another pause, longer this time. "Mr. Harper," she said coolly, "I strongly advise you to reconsider. Blocking community access isn't neighborly. And frankly, it could affect property values. We'd hate to escalate this unnecessarily." That last part wasn't a threat, not openly. But damn if it didn't feel like one. "I'll be in touch, Phyllis," I said flatly, and hung up. I sat there for a minute, staring out at the fence line, the empty road beyond it, the signs piled in my truck bed like war trophies. I'd lived my whole life on this land. My granddad built this fence with his own hands. And now some suburban dictator thought she could just redraw my boundaries with a few signs and a smug phone call? Not a chance. I stepped out, grabbed a hammer and a fresh sign of my own from the barn, and nailed it right dead center of the fence. Private property. No trespassing. Let's see Phyllis try and formalize that. A few days later, I was out in the south pasture with Thor. Big Boy was grazing contentedly, his thick neck bending down as he ripped up tufts of grass, his massive bulk casting a long shadow in the afternoon sun. Thor wasn't just any bull. He was practically family. Stubborn as a mule, strong as a freight train, and surprisingly gentle if you didn't get on his bad side. He'd been born right here on the ranch, and I'd raised him from a calf. Hell, he'd probably outstare half the men I knew. I was leaning on the fence, watching him plod along, when the sound of an engine caught my ear. I turned my head just in time to see a shiny white pickup roll up along the county road, slowing as it approached the pasture. Even from a distance, I could tell who it was. Phyllis. The truck came to a stop right across from where Thor stood, chewing lazily near the fence. The window rolled down. For a second, I thought maybe she'd just drive on by. But no. A sharp, angry honk blared through the air, followed by another, and another. "What the hell?" I muttered. Phyllis leaned out of the window, her perfectly coiffed hair catching the breeze, her face pinched with irritation. "Get that monster out of sight!" she yelled across the road. "He's terrifying the neighborhood kids. This is a family area." I raised an eyebrow. "Lady, you're on a public road, staring at a bull on a private ranch. Nobody told you to come sightseeing." She ignored me, jabbing her finger toward Thor. "You need to move him. I've had complaints. People can see him from the trail. It's unsightly and dangerous." Before I could answer, she slammed her palm against the horn again. Long, loud, obnoxious. The sound ripped through the quiet afternoon like a siren. I saw Thor freeze, ears flicking forward, his entire body tensing. His hooves shifted against the dirt, nostrils flaring wide. He let out a deep, rumbling snort. "Oh no!" I whispered. Phyllis kept honking, completely oblivious. "Move it, you stupid animal!" she shrieked. Thor lowered his head, muscles rippling beneath his hide. I saw the familiar sign, the way he pawed at the ground, like a bull in a cartoon about to charge. Except this wasn't no cartoon. "Phyllis, stop!" I shouted. "Back away from the fence!" But she wasn't listening. Another honk, another shout. Thor let out a roar of a bellow, dug his hooves deep, and then he launched forward, like a damn battering ram in a 1,000-pound body of muscle and horn. He slammed full force into the fence. The old boards held, barely, but the impact vibrated down the posts like an earthquake. And it didn't stop there. Thor backed up a few paces, snorted again, and this time angled himself at the side of her truck. He charged straight into the passenger door with a crunch that made my teeth ache just hearing it. Metal crumpled like a soda can. The truck rocked violently, then slid sideways, tires screeching, before tipping into the shallow drainage ditch along the road. Phyllis screamed, scrambling inside the cab. Her hands fumbled with her phone, holding it up to her ear. I could hear her shouting even from where I stood. 911! I'm under attack! There's a wild animal attacking my vehicle. Send the sheriff. I want this beast put down. I'm suing this man!" Thor stood proudly at the top of the ditch, snorting steam from his nostrils, head high, like he'd just won a battle. His tail flicked once, smug as hell. I sighed, resting my arms on the fence. "Well, Thor," I murmured, "guess you're not much for diplomacy." The sheriff's department would be here soon, and judging by Phyllis's screeching, they were about to get an earful. But as far as I could see, my bull hadn't left my land. And nobody had told Phyllis to come harassing him with horns and hollers. Let them come. I had nothing to hide. The next morning, I figured things might settle down. Foolish of me. I stepped out onto the porch with my coffee and looked toward the fence line, and nearly dropped the mug right then and there. New signs. A whole new set of them, nailed right onto the fence posts I'd reinforced just last week. Bold white letters screamed at me. Community access route, public right-of-way. I stared, blinking hard, as if maybe I was still half asleep. But no, they were real. At least a dozen of them, evenly spaced, marching down the fence like little flags planted in victory. "Son of a," I muttered, slamming my cup down and stomping across the yard. As I got closer, my boots crunching in the gravel, I saw it wasn't just signs. A section of my fence had been pulled down completely. Posts knocked loose, boards piled to the side like scrap wood. Beyond the gap, a clear dirt path had been carved straight across the pasture, leading from the edge of the HOA development right toward the river. Someone had started building their so-called trail. I stood there for a moment, breathing deep, counting to 10 like my daddy taught me. Then I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the security camera app. Sure enough, footage from late last night showed two men in reflective vests, hauling tools, pulling down the fence, hammering in stakes. Contractors, hired hands. They weren't even trying to hide it. Unbelievable, I muttered. I dialed the HOA number again. This time, it rang straight to voicemail. "Phyllis," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You've crossed a line. That's my property, and you're trespassing. I suggest you call me back before I call the sheriff." I hung up and called the sheriff anyway. While I waited, I grabbed some old plywood from the barn and started boarding up the gap. Every hammer strike echoed like punctuation to my rising anger. My hands worked faster than my brain, muscle memory kicking in from years of fixing fences after storms, or ornery bulls. The patrol car rolled up not long after, and Deputy Harris stepped out, his sunglasses glinting in the sun. "Morning, Jack," he said, eyeing the mess. "Heard you had some trouble again." "You could say that," I sighed, waving toward the wreckage. "They tore down my fence last night. Look at this trail. They're cutting through like it's theirs." Harris whistled low. "Got footage?" "Sure do." I pulled up the video and handed him my phone. He watched silently, nodding. "I'll file a report," he said. "But they didn't break a lock, and technically they claim it's a right-of-way. Could get messy." I gritted my teeth. "Messy's one word for it." Before Harris left, we spotted a couple of folks from the HOA strolling down the new path, snapping photos like they were on a guided tour. One lady actually waved at me like we were neighbors swapping casseroles. I didn't wave back. That afternoon, I drove into town, straight to the county records office. I spent 2 hours pulling every deed, plat map, and survey document I could find about my land. There wasn't a single mention of any public easement, any trail, nothing. My property line was solid, same as it had been since my granddad bought it. When I got back home, there were more footprints along the path. Some kid had dropped a juice box in the grass. Another group had left a picnic blanket and empty beer cans right in the middle of my pasture. This wasn't just a fight over a fence anymore. They were claiming it like a public park. I set up 3 new trail cams, wired the floodlights, hung fresh, no trespassing signs. I wasn't going to let them turn my land into their playground, not while I still had breath in my lungs. The next day, I wasn't taking any chances. Before sunrise, I was already out by the fence, boots sinking into damp grass, checking every post, every board, every damn inch of that property line. The path was still there, trampled down like a scar across the pasture, and the signs were still nailed up bold as ever. But what made my blood boil wasn't the signs. It was the fresh set of stakes I found hammered deeper into my land, bright orange tape fluttering in the breeze. They were marking it, planning something bigger. I grabbed my phone and called Deputy Harris again. "You better come back out here," I told him. "They're not just trespassing. They're prepping for construction." He showed up an hour later, this time with a second deputy in tow. They walked the line with me, snapping photos, measuring the distance between the stakes and the documented property line I'd shown them last time. Harris shook his head. "They've gone past any claim of a right-of-way, Jack. This looks like encroachment, plain and simple." I nodded grimly. "And they're not even subtle about it." While we talked, a silver SUV pulled up on the road. The window rolled down, and sure enough, there was Phyllis, sunglasses perched high, a smug little smile curling her lips. "Officers," she called sweetly, "what seems to be the issue here?" Harris stepped forward. "Ma'am, we're investigating reports of unauthorized work being conducted across Mr. Harper's property." Phyllis let out a tinkling laugh. "Oh, no need to investigate. The HOA approved the extension of the community trail. We submitted the plans weeks ago to the city council." "Did you get permission from the landowner?" Harris asked flatly. Phyllis's smile tightened. "The land has historically been used as a footpath for years. We're simply formalizing it. Frankly, I'm surprised Mr. Harper is being so difficult about this." I crossed my arms. "It's never been a footpath. And I've got maps, deeds, and records going back 70 years proving it's private land. There's no easement, no right-of-way, no nothing." Phyllis's lips pursed, but she kept her composure. "I'm afraid this isn't up for debate, Mr. Harper. Our attorney will be contacting you." Harris scribbled something in his notebook. "We're putting a stop work notice on this for now," he told her, "until the county reviews it. Any more unauthorized entry could lead to charges." Her eyes flashed for a split second, but she only nodded tightly and drove off. I watched her taillights disappear down the road. "She's not done," I muttered. "Nope," Harris agreed, "but at least this slows her down." The county clerk called me that afternoon. "Jack, we're reviewing some filings from Maple Hills HOA. Looks like they submitted a modified plat map last month, showing a historical trail easement across the southern boundary of your ranch." My stomach turned cold. "That's not real. That trail never existed." "We know," the clerk said. "It doesn't match any official records, but they stamped it like it's valid. We're flagging it for investigation." I hung up, pacing the porch, heart pounding. She'd faked the map, straight up lied to the county. As the sun went down, I saw two teenagers walking the path again, phones out, filming the cows, snickering like it was all a joke. And behind them, a man in a hard hat, snapping measurements. I went inside, pulled out my granddad's old Winchester, and leaned it by the front door. If they wanted a fight over this land, they were about to learn just how stubborn a Harper could be. By the time the official letter arrived, I wasn't even surprised anymore. A thick envelope, hand-delivered by a nervous-looking courier, stamped with the name of some slick law firm out of town. Inside, a notice of civil action. Maple Hills Homeowners Association vs. Jackson Harper. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the papers, while my coffee went cold. They were suing me for blocking community access to a so-called historical trail that never existed. They claimed prescriptive easement, some legal mumbo-jumbo about long-term use granting them rights over my land. And of course, at the bottom of the page, I saw her signature. Phyllis Marlowe, President. I called up my lawyer, Alan McCoy, an old friend of my father's who'd handled ranch disputes for half the county at one point or another. "Alan," I said, "they're trying to take my pasture." He chuckled darkly. "Heard rumblings about this, Jack. Don't you worry. We've beat dumber claims." Alan and I spent the next 2 weeks gathering everything we could. Every deed, every survey, every plat map dating back to my granddad's purchase in 1955. We pulled aerial photos from the USDA archives, showing nothing but grass and fence lines, no trails, no footpaths, no public use. I even dug up an old family photo with my dad standing by that same fence, a line of cattle grazing behind him. Proof that for 3 generations, this had been ours, uninterrupted. The day of the hearing, I walked into the county courthouse wearing my best jeans and clean boots. Alan had told me to look respectable, not flashy. Across the aisle, I saw Phyllis perched at the plaintiff's table in a bright white blazer, flanked by 2 young attorneys in tailored suits. She gave me a tight little smile like she'd already won. The judge, an old, no-nonsense woman named Judge Ramirez, called things to order. Phyllis's lawyer stood up first, rattling off a speech about community welfare and historical precedent. He claimed residents had used the trail for decades to access the river, that it was a vital part of neighborhood culture, that I was selfishly walling off natural resources. Judge Ramirez frowned. "Do you have documentation of this use?" The lawyer cleared his throat. "Well, no formal documentation, Your Honor, but we have sworn statements from residents." Allen stood. "Your Honor, we have actual documentation. Official records showing no recorded easement, no path, no right-of-way, no variance granted. And we have aerial photographs dating back 40 years confirming no visible trail. This land has been fenced and used exclusively for ranching since at least 1955. He handed up the stack of exhibits. The judge flipped through them slowly. "These are compelling," she murmured. Phyllis shot to her feet. "Your Honor, everyone in Maple Hills knows this trail existed. My children used it. The neighborhood kids used it. This man's been hostile from day one." Allen raised an eyebrow. "Your Honor, emotional recollections aren't legal proof. There's no written permission, no legal precedent, no recognized right. Just a neighborhood president trying to rewrite history." Judge Ramirez sighed, resting her chin on her hand. "I don't see sufficient grounds to grant this easement. The claim of prescriptive use lacks continuity, visibility, and necessity. I'm ruling in favor of Mr. Harper." I felt the air rush out of me in relief. "And," the judge continued, "given the unauthorized entry, destruction of private fencing, and installation of signage without consent, I'm awarding damages to Mr. Harper for repairs and legal fees." Allen grinned and clapped me on the shoulder. Across the room, Phyllis's face crumpled. For a split second, I almost pitied her. Almost. But then I remembered those teenagers cutting through my pasture, the broken fence, the trespassers with their cameras. No, I thought, she earned every bit of this. I thought maybe, just maybe, winning in court would be the end of it. But with Phyllis, nothing was ever that simple. The morning after the ruling, I stepped outside and saw a drone buzzing over the pasture, low and slow, its little camera eye pointed straight down at Thor and the herd. I waved my arms, tried shouting, but the thing just hovered higher, circling like a vulture. 15 minutes later, it zipped back toward the HOA development. By noon, my phone was lighting up with texts from neighbors, some sympathetic, some not. Turns out, Phyllis had posted drone footage online, calling my ranch an eyesore and claiming my cattle were a biohazard threatening neighborhood health. She'd even tagged the county health department in her post, demanding an inspection. I laughed bitterly. She's really pulling out all the stops. Allen called later that day. "Jack, brace yourself. She filed an appeal. Slim chance it holds, but she's trying to stall." Of course she was. A week later, I found fresh footprints along the fence line. Someone had tried prying up one of the new private property signs I'd posted after the trial. Another time, I caught 2 HOA board members standing just inside the property line, taking photos with measuring tapes in hand. When I confronted them, they mumbled something about documenting drainage violations and scurried off. At the next HOA meeting, where I wasn't allowed, mind you, Phyllis allegedly ranted for half an hour about my hostile agricultural practices lowering their property values. Someone leaked a recording. I listened, half amused, half exasperated, as she promised to pursue every legal avenue and lobby the county for rezoning. But the final blow came 2 weeks later when a local reporter knocked on my door. "Mr. Harper," she said, holding up a notepad. Any comment on the audit? Audit? I frowned. Turns out, a group of HOA members had filed complaints accusing Phyllis of misusing HOA funds, paying for her personal legal expenses with community money. The board had quietly launched an internal review, and now the press had picked it up. The next day, Phyllis resigned. The day after that, a moving truck showed up outside her house. I watched from the porch, sipping coffee as they loaded box after box into the truck. No farewell party, no neighbors waving goodbye. Just a woman in a designer coat, standing stiff and defeated as the last of her things disappeared inside. When she climbed into the passenger seat and the truck pulled away, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of satisfaction and pity. But mostly satisfaction. A month passed. Things got quiet again. The drone stopped buzzing. The HOA meetings dropped off my radar. For the first time in a long while, I could stand on my porch, coffee in hand, and look out over my land without wondering what fresh hell was coming over the fence. Then one afternoon, a knock rattled the front door. I opened it to find a young man in a pressed shirt and tie, maybe late 20s, holding a clipboard and looking nervous. "Mr. Harper?" he asked. "That's me. I'm Ben Carter, the new president of Maple Hills HOA. Mind if I have a word?" I stepped outside, crossing my arms. "You're braver than your predecessor, showing up here." He chuckled softly. "I figured it was time to clear the air. Look, I know the history between you and Phyllis. I read the whole case file. Honestly, I don't agree with half the things she did. We're trying to reset things with our neighbors." I raised an eyebrow. "Reset?" He nodded. "We're drafting new policies, focusing inward. No more trying to claim land that's not ours. No more trail talks. I wanted to come personally and tell you, we're done poking at your ranch." I studied him for a beat, then nodded slowly. "Good to hear." He hesitated. "And, if you're willing, we'd like to establish a formal understanding. Put it in writing. No claims, no easements, no more disputes. Just peace." I rubbed my chin. "That sounds real neighborly, Ben. You get that in writing, send it through my lawyer, and we'll talk." His smile widened. "Will do. Thanks for hearing me out." After he left, I stood a while longer, watching the sun dip toward the treetops. For the first time since this mess started, I actually believed it might be over. But later that evening, just as dusk settled in, I spotted a familiar figure standing at the edge of the road. Phyllis. She wasn't dressed like before. No blazer, no polished hair, just jeans and a jacket, her posture slumped, her gaze lingering over the pasture. I walked to the gate, leaning against it. "Come to claim the land again?" I called dryly. She shook her head. "No, not this time." Silence stretched between us. "I wanted to see it one last time," she said softly. "Thought I'd be here longer. Thought a lot of things." I didn't answer, just waited. She looked down, then back up. "You won, Jack. Fair and square. I made a mess of it. Guess I didn't know when to quit." I gave a small nod. "You didn't make it easy." She smiled faintly. "Wasn't supposed to be easy. But you held your ground. I respect that." For a fleeting second, she almost looked like a different person, tired but honest. She took a step back toward her car. "Good luck with the ranch." "You too, Phyllis," I said quietly. She climbed in, the engine humming to life, and just like that, she drove off, disappearing down the road. I stayed there a moment longer, listening to the crickets stir in the twilight, feeling the land settle beneath me again. Maybe peace wasn't just a word on paper. Maybe, after all this, it was finally earned. A few more months slipped by, and life finally settled back into the rhythm I'd known before all the madness started. The fences stood strong, the pasture greened up after spring rains, and Thor was still Thor, lounging like a king under the old oak by the creek, swishing his tail at flies like they were beneath his notice. One quiet evening, I sat out on the porch with Ellie, my wife, a glass of sweet tea in hand. The sunset spread gold and pink across the sky, bleeding into the hills beyond. We watched as the cows drifted in from the far field, Thor lumbering along at the back like a slow-moving battleship. Ellie leaned against me. "Looks peaceful again," she murmured. I smiled. "Feels peaceful, too." The double fence gleamed in the fading light, reinforced with fresh cedar posts, and a line of barbed wire that no one would mistake for an invitation. Every few yards, one of the new metal signs glinted. "Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted." I'd added cameras, motion lights, even a remote gate opener that let me check visitors from my phone. No more hikers wandering through, no more HOA lackeys measuring distances or snapping photos. Just quiet. Just ours. "You think they'll try again?" Ellie asked. "Nah," I said, shaking my head. "New president's smarter. And Phyllis? I don't think she'll ever set foot near here again." She sipped her tea, smiling softly. "I still can't believe that bull of yours took out a truck." I chuckled low. "Neither can I. But I swear, Ellie, Thor knew. He knew exactly what he was doing." Down in the pasture, Thor paused, lifting his massive head, his dark eyes catching the last sliver of sunlight. He let out a deep, satisfied snort, then turned back to his grazing. Ellie laughed. "Looks like he's standing guard." I grinned, raising my glass toward the pasture. Best damn security system money never had to buy. And as the sky faded to deep indigo, a soft breeze rolling across the fields, I leaned back in my chair, content in the quiet. The land was ours again, and this time it was staying that way.